Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. My name is Tessa. I'm from the Rivonia circle. I'm very happy that people decided to leave their homes this morning, even when it was a little bit colder than I expected Durban to be. I didn't think I was going to need a jacket to Durban. But thank you so much for joining us this morning. So this morning we are going to talk a little bit about who Rivonia circle is, what it is that we do. We're going to talk a little bit about the kind of ideas that we have and we want to talk to people about in terms of the kind of country that we want to be. And so as we go through the morning, I hope things become clearer. But who we are and what we are is what I'm going to talk about this morning. And then at some point you're going to start talking this morning. Because part of the reason why we exist, and I'll explain a little bit more after the video, is that in a country like ours, we understand that there are many things that go right. But a lot of the things go wrong. But a lot of the things that go right are happening because it is people every day in our lives, in our families, in our communities, and we are making our lives work, we're making our communities work, we're making the country work. And we believe in it. And so this morning we want to have a conversation about how do we start to collaborate with each other in terms of the kind of future that we want to see in our country. That's really why we're here this morning. So I want to start with this morning by showing you just a video about the Rivonia Circle that introduces you to the idea of who we are, and then we're going to have a bit of a conversation after that. Is that all right? Because I'm also not sure if you know why you are here. So we're going to get to that in a little bit time, yeah? I hope this plays in the ways that I want it to. In the circle of profound ideas to transform our society, we believe in this cause. The cornerstone of our future is stepping in to the circle. Rebuilding communities and economy for a better tomorrow. Necessary public dialogue. Projects to shape the future. An event for fresh ideas, for committed and capable leaders, restorative for a new normal, a forward-thinking South Africa. We all have a role to play, different backgrounds, different communities, different abilities, one circle. We stand in the ruins of our unpleasant past to build a South Africa for the future. Welcome, Rivonia Circle. A knowledge hub for policy change and political alternatives, connecting communities, activists, academics, and leaders. Together, working towards solidarity, equality, justice, and the well-being of all South Africans. All right. So, for my part, where I want to start off is that the Rivonia Circle is an organization that is a knowledge hub. What we mean by that is the way in which we see ourselves is a place where people can come and share their ideas about their own experiences, about the country, about what it is that we are doing, and how it is that we move things forward. And so we always say that when we talk about the Rivonia Circle, that what we really do is two things. We talk about ideas, and particularly policy ideas, and we talk about action, and particularly political action. Now, when you think about something like policy and politics and political action, most of the time in our society, who are the people who do those things? Who does that? Who does that? Activists? Who else? Who does policy conversations and who talks about politics and who does politics? Anybody? Yeah? Members of the legislature, so people in parliament, they do those things. Who else talks about policies in our country? Who talks about policies?
I think administrators maybe in government circles.
Administrators in government circles talk about policies and politics. Yeah? Business people talk about policy?
Policymakers. Policymakers.
Policymakers. So who's policymakers? We've seen some different categories.
Of course, politicians, in the legislature, even society to a certain degree.
So you're saying politicians, people who work in government, but even society.
Yes.
And I like that.
Academics.
Yeah.
Included, yes.
Say again?
Academics included.
Academics included.
Yes.
So there are many different people who should be talking about policy and who should be talking about politics. But sometimes in our minds we think there's only some people who can talk about policy. There's only some people who can talk about politics. And in our minds that really needs to change. We all need to start thinking about how do we create the right set of ideas and the right set of actions so that we can all be part of doing the things that it takes to create the lives that we want, right? And the communities that we want, and the country that we want. And so we have formed this platform to do that. And we do it in different ways. And I'm going to talk about some of the different ways in which we do that, so that you understand who it is that you're in the room engaging with. And then we're going to talk a little bit about who you are, and what brings you into the room, and what kind of ideas you have. But I don't want you to do that without knowing who you're talking to, right? So let me pull something up with me so that I can explain a little bit more about how we do this. How do we get people engaged in talking about policy and ideas and talking about action? But one thing you must know, technology will always sabotage you. It's never late with sabotaging you. Alright. Let me wait for that to figure itself out. Alright. So there are different ways in which we do this at the Rivonia Circle, and some of that we've done in the last few days in Durban, in different communities in Durban. The first way that we engage people in these policy conversations and action conversations is something we call conversation circles. So what are conversation circles? They are opportunities for people to get together and discuss important ideas, policy ideas, current affairs, things that are happening in the country that's important. And we do that and encourage that to happen on many different platforms. So, for example, we do it on Twitter every week. We have a Twitter space where we invite people to talk about certain issues, be it education, be it movement building. We've had many different kinds of conversations. But the way in which we do this is we say that we want to have conversations that are inclusive, where everyone can be included in the conversation. We want to have conversations that are respectful, where people respect each other's ideas, but also where we can disagree. We live in a society where disagreeing has become difficult. and we don't disagree in ways necessarily that always lead us to move forward. But we try to create conversations where we can disagree, but we can move forward. We can make progress. Disagree, but move forward. Disagree, but move forward. It doesn't help that we all pretend like we agree if we don't. That's the worst kind of society to live in, where people pretend they agree with each other, but they actually don't. It's going to lead to conflict at some point. At some point, somebody is going to say, no, this is not working for me. So we must learn how to disagree, but we must also learn how to move forward. But the most important part of the conversations that we try to have are that they must be based on solutions. Solutions are the most important reason why we have conversations. Solutions must be the reason why we have conversations. If we're just having conversations to talk, who cares? Honestly, then it was nice, and we enjoyed each other's company. But if we don't actually do something different after that, then we didn't actually spend our time very well. And so we encourage people to have conversations that have solutions at the end of them. And so that's how conversation circle work. Another kind of work that we do, and we're going to talk a little bit about this later on, is we do research circles. And so in our research circles work, we are launching this weekend what we call policy communities or policy groups. And we've got 5 areas in which we work when it comes to policy groups, and a little bit later you'll get to do some of that work. Because we're going to talk about how we start to think about policy ideas. But those groups of people are any people in the society who want to engage around a particular issue, be it the economy, be it environmental justice, be it social development, and create places where people who care about the same things can talk about the same things. Sometimes we come from very different places, but we care about the same things. And so we want to create platforms where people who care about the same things can come and talk about them, but actually start thinking about what does it look like to think about it in a policy. So you can make a suggestion. So we do research, we do different kinds of research where it feeds into platforms where people from all walks of life can say, what do we do with this information in order for it to help us think about how we move things forward. The third type of thing that we do, which is one of my favorite things, is called arts and culture circles. So arts and culture circles you would have seen from the video. There's a few people dancing, singing, all sorts of things. We run a program called Political Theatre. And Political Theatre is a 5-day workshop. It's a skills workshop where people who are interested in the arts, in dance, in drama, in any form of expression, come in and they learn those things. They learn those skills over 5 days. And at the end of the 5 days, they then do a showcase of their skills or of their talent. What has this got to do with policy ideas and political action? What has it got to do with that? Really what it's got to do with that is we need to be able to express our ideas. And not everybody expresses their ideas the same way. I know it's something we do every day, but talking is not for everyone. Talking is hard. There's one thing that's hard, it's talking. Because there are certain skill sets and certain ways of engaging in the world that some people do better than others. And when it comes to something like dance and drama and all of those things, they are important parts of creating ways that we all can think about the same things at the same time. And our country is full of particularly young people who have skills and who have talents and who want to get involved. Yesterday we had a long conversation in Newlands, a long conversation that said young people are not involved. Young people don't want to participate. Young people are not engaged. A friend of mine who's a youth worker, when people say young people are not writing, they're not reading, she says, but what is Twitter? She said, what is Facebook? They're reading Facebook. I can tell you for free, young people are reading Facebook. I can tell you for free, young people are writing on Twitter. What are they doing there? They are writing and they are reading, but they're doing it in the ways that they want to do it, not the ways that are expected by somebody else. And so we must create as many ways as possible for people to find expression, to find a way to express themselves in this democracy. Because if it's going to be theirs, if it's going to be ours, all of us must be accommodated. So, again, when we usually say policy conversations or policy discussions, have you ever thought about somebody who is a rapper in a policy conversation, creating policy? Why must that person be excluded because they're a rapper and they're not an academic? And so it's our way of trying to find new ways for people to really be able to participate that is outside of what is normal. Yeah? And then there's something that we're developing called training circles, and training circles is an opportunity for us to provide training opportunities for people who are community activists and for people who would like to work in public service. We think that it's important that we have places where we can share ideas and share skills to shape each other. And then the last one, which we've done in Durban in the last few days, is called action circles. Action circles. So we have a program called the Democracy Builder. And I'm almost tempted to ask the people who were at the Democracy Builder to explain what it is. But the Democracy Builder is a very simple thing. We bring people together in a community. We talk about what democracy means to us. And then we talk about how we create solutions together and we build our democracy. That's a democracy builder. And for most democracy builders, there's a project or an opportunity for people to do a project at the end where they work together to build the democracy. And so that's how we do our work. That's what we do, that's where we do it. And that's our main programs, but there are also other things that we got engaged in. So there are a few ways that we engage with people. We say these are our programs and people participate in them. But there are also people who come to us and say, this is what we are doing, can you be a part of it? So for example, in El Dorado Park, where I'm from, there's a church that runs a show, a podcast, called The Inside Show. And they've decided to have a segment on there that's about social and political issues. So we are now partnering with them to be able to bring that kind of information onto a church platform. Because they said it's important that people know and they can have a place where they can talk about these things and they can be engaged. And so it's not just about what we are doing, and that's why we have this kind of session, is that it's collaboration and working together towards the kind of future that we want that is more important than just what we do. What we do is what we do. But everyone's doing something. People are doing things everywhere. And there are ways that we can start to work together, or not even we, whether we are involved or not, actually is neither here nor there. But we need to start thinking about how we start to work together as a society and not just change our own lives or our own family or our own community, but hopefully change the entire country that we live in. So that's who we are, that's what we do. Are there questions? Are there questions? Before I move on to the next phase, which you are going to have to get involved in. Are there questions? No? No questions? Absolutely. Absolutely none. None. Nothing. I was clear. Yes.
What kinds of trainings are we talking about?
Yeah, so the training, so Democracy Builder has actually got a training component in it, and I want to build out into a full training for how people who are doing community work can have better skill sets and learn things like project management, things like how to design a strategy. So very practical skills for community activists, organizers. And then there are programs where people, there's a program called Future Elect, for example. And that's a program for young people who would like to work in public office. And so we want to have similar programs like that that teach you what is the policy, how does government work, how does the system work, so that if you want to be part of that system, you then know how it works. So it's trainings like that that we're working on. Anything else? Anything else? Going once? Going twice? All right. Then we're going to move to the section where you start to talk because I'm done. I'm done now. Now, I'm going to ask that we create circles. We said our name is Rivonia Circle. So we're going to create circles. And those circles are going to be for us to have a conversation about what we think the future of the country could look like. Now, yesterday and the day before, when we were doing Democracy Builder, we spoke about South Africa 2.0. You saw that on the posters. South Africa 2.0. South Africa. What is that? South Africa 2.0 is our way of Rivonia Circle of saying two things. One, South Africa as a country is due for an upgrade. What do we mean? So, when we had 94, we created this thing we call South Africa now. It was the first time we had a South Africa that was democratic, that was for all of us. So whatever that thing was before 94, it wasn't South Africa. It was some version of a thing that wasn't for all of us. And when you create something, whether it's a country or a phone, at some point you have to start thinking about how you start to change that thing and make it fit for how the changes in your society happen. And so we say that we have a country now, but is it the one that works for us and does the things that we want it to do? And can we picture one that actually does work for us if this one doesn't? It doesn't mean we must put the whole thing in the bin. I'm not saying put South Africa in the bin and start over. I mean, although, I will say, in Durban, the theme has been dismantle everything. Ask people, what must we do with democracy? Break it and start over. Burn it down and start over. We can debate that. I'm willing to debate that. Before I came here, I wasn't willing to debate that thing. I was like, let's just start with what we have. And people in Durban have said, break it, start over. Dismantle it, start over. Whichever path you follow when it comes to that thinking. I think we all agree that we need a better version of this thing. Yes. We all agree we need a better version of this thing. And so South Africa 2.0 is an opportunity for us to think about what is a better version of this thing for us. The thing that will make me actually want to participate in this thing. What will it have to look like for me to participate in it? And so this morning, as part of your engagement in this discussion and in this space, your first engagement, there's going to be around 2. I'm going to ask you to think about what the South Africa that you have in your mind, the best version of it is. And I want you to think about how you will create it with other people. Are you okay with that? Can we shift gears a little bit here? From me talking and you listening to you talking and me listening. Are you okay with that? Yes? No? Yes. Yes. All right. So I'm going to ask you to form groups of about 8. So form groups of 8 in a circle, and then I'm going to give you an instruction around what you need to do once you are in groups. So form groups of 8 in a circle. governance. It includes things like food, water, housing, basic human rights, education, health. All of those things are social services. So those go into the social policy area. We've got an area called environmental justice. Environmental justice, and that includes things like just clean environment that we live in, or the kind of environment that we live in. It includes things like what this year has gone through in the last 2 weeks, like the face of climate change, disasters, when people have to change jobs because of things like what's happening in the energy sector with mining. All of that fits into environmental justice. Another policy area that we have is law and constitutionalism. Another one is democracy and governance. So I'm going to give each group one of those areas. And the thing I want you to talk about as a group is answer this question. In your perfect version of South Africa, in your perfect, what do they say on South Africa? This is my perfect South Africa. What would South Africa look like when it comes to that thing? So, I don't want you to say, what is the problem with that? That's what I think. I don't want you to say, what are we going to do to fix this thing? I want you to talk to each other about what is your perfect version of that thing, and write down 5 things that South Africa would have if that thing was perfect. If the economy was perfect, what would it look like? If law and constitutionalism was perfect, what would South Africa look like? If democracy and governance was perfect, what would South Africa look like? And I want you to write down just 5 things you all agree on. So contest ideas, win debates, but make sure you come up with 5 things that you can all agree on, and then we're going to have a conversation. So this group I'm going to give the economy, that group I'm going to give social policy, this group I'm going to give democracy and governance, and this group we can choose between law and constitutionalism or environmental justice. Get a choice. All right? So I'm going to give everybody 15 minutes to have this chat. Come up with 5 things you can agree on.
So there's a connection between bad governance and the next election results.
places that countries in some communities highly accountability. The reason that they give highly accountability is one, because they have the resources that they want, and two, that they can organize against harm. So for me, part of getting organized ourselves in order to take control. Don't chase the cost. So getting to know that it's not creating but getting to know that it is institution that knows the political part of the actually accountable. They can do so it's because they can send it's complicated. I would say systems of accountability don't sit
Okay. Can you please make the second bigger? Let's put it into the bigger room. Let's come back, comrades. Let's come back. Clearly, the conversations are nice. Okay. from the groups. Our conversation right now, for those who are joining us, is around South Africa 2.0. What do we want, or what do we think that South Africa, our perfect South Africa, what do you think it looks like? So I'm going to ask the feedback into the room. Volunteers here, we can go, I'm not going to click on anybody. And that in the space we know that we can speak in whatever language we like to speak in, we'll find each other along the way, right? Secondly, colleagues in terms of maybe may need to be contested or there's a contestation right? The idea of this room is that we contest, as I was saying later on. Can I ask the first group to feedback? And I'm going to give a little bit of feedback from the last couple of days. What have some of the things that have come out? That's instance, like yes and fact. Isn't it like a great comment? That's what I wanted to say. And let's also the feedback.
Any group is first group. Long guys.
I'm okay. I was just about to say your conversation seems so nice. Now you want to share with us.
Good morning, everyone.
Say your name as well.
My name is Paul. So we got the democracy and governance of the group. So the first point that we came up with is direct representation. So the idea behind this is that currently in Parliament, the people, we don't really vote for guys who sit in the So we get somebody from our communities, vote directly for them, and we know that our interests as a community is represented. So that's the first one. The second point is less reliant on political parties and more on civic. So the idea behind all civic structures holding a lot more weight over politics than the current holds. Third one is elected parties should constitute the civic over their political party. So when we vote in our councils, the councils have to constitute their parties before they have to constitute us as the civic. How does that fit? The fourth one is structures in the community. The fourth one is that structures in the community. Oh, okay. So basically, it's also just around structures in the community and not in politics. So how do we exercise everything? And then the last one is radical transparency.
Yeah, I like it. One of the most interesting things, and Durban has really been very interesting for me. I've been surprised at every turn. Politically, I've just been surprised. One of the most interesting things that we heard on Thursday with the Democracy Builder when we were in Wentworth, and friends from Lukhona joined us as well, was this conversation of South Africa 2.0 when it comes to local government. And really the proposal was very simple, is that it shouldn't exist. And that rather communities should govern themselves, and communities should be able to do things for themselves without being constrained or restricted by things like wards and whatever the things that come with the municipal government is. And so when we say we want a kind of radical transparency, but we also want that the civic is the more important thing when it comes to government or governance, it takes me back to that conversation around whether or not we even need or must find in the regular sense. And I think that that's an interesting conversation. I had never thought about it before. It's possible that people just govern themselves in their own communities. And one of the examples that was made is that sometimes the municipality owns vacant land, and as a community, you want to have mhlampe ingadi khona for the community, but you can't because the land belongs to the municipality. What if the land just belongs to all of us?
Because there was no municipality.
If the land just belongs to all of us, no municipality, then we get to sit down as a collective in the community and decide, right? In a way, as well as right? Yeah, so I think that that's interesting. The politics are hot. And ask the next group to feedback. If you have comments, please feel free to jump in with comments.
Thank you. Tina, the social policy. So we thought that the idea of perfect South Africa would have proper housing and infrastructure for every person, compulsory free equal education. There shouldn't be people going to forward and getting proper education and getting whatever, yeah. And then free and equal healthcare services. You shouldn't go to a private hospital for you to get everything that you want. And then classless society. We shouldn't have our presidents, our parliament any more than ordinary people. I'm not sure if you guys would like to add more on that one. Yeah. And then family structure and humanity. So they should bring back family structures to avoid having a matter and such things. I'm not sure if you guys want to add more on that one. So.
Yeah, we were saying with regards to the family structure, that power should be given back to the family. The way things stand now is that the family is weak, and it seems as if these structures are dictating to family values, dictating to how families should bring up children, whether it's good or it's bad. But we are saying that if families, if power is not given back to families, how then do we develop a democratic, how then do we develop a community that is mobilized and able to deal with its own problems in its own society?
And then also to sum it all up, it was basically saying we should all have equal rights. And we should not have this thing in the workplace where they say that trying to introduce that quota system where they say there should be more blacks and there should be less of another race, because that's bringing back racism indirectly. And then also with salaries that some genders earn more than certain genders, so that's one. A perfect society is socially inclusive.
Okay. Yeah.
To add on that, we also mentioned that on this classless society, the intention was that the people in government must not earn money, which is like 10 times more than the minimum wage. So if you want to be in government, you must earn less so that you can bring, if you want to join politics, you know it's not for the stomach, but it's so their money that they paid, it must not be 10 times more than the minimum wage.
We said something as well on social rights. And we were saying that one, there should be a basic income grant for everybody. Maybe you work or you don't work, whatever the case may be. And in the case of unemployed people, as well as children who receive and pensioners who receive these grants that you can't even afford. You probably just have it for a week or for a few days and the grant is finished. We are saying that they need to live in an ideal society, that we need to have if it's an unemployed person, why doesn't that unemployed person get a basic income grant equivalent to somebody that is working to meet at least meet their basic needs, as well as for children and as well as for pensioners as well.
Yeah, okay. So I think, when we talk about social policy and social protection, I think one of the conversations myself and Tessa specifically have often is a conversation around how strange it is to live in a society where being poor and being hungry, like where you have to work in order to eat. It's the same concept when you think about schools, and the reason we have PBT, it's because in 9 years it's controlled that that's a basic first understanding. And so it's strange to live in a society where social protection and social policy isn't always prioritized. Particularly when you say you want to move to a social democracy, and we think that those things are important. It's strange to live in a society where the conversation around the basic income grant is still something that we're talking about. I mean, Ellen was saying the other day that when they were still, back then when they were having a conversation, when they were having a conversation about the basic income grant, they were asking for 100 times. 100 times. Strange that we are still having that conversation and we have not come to any sort of conclusion around who's Sizwe njani. Was about back to pay. Yeah, so it's strange. Do you want to comment? Right? Okay. Yes.
You know, especially the way technology is going right now. Technology is at the point where a lot of us are becoming very clear. I think it's a necessity to have something like this because else then the government starts making these weird sort of concessions that are nonsensical. A quick example of this here is that tolls are easily automated. But because now we don't want to pay the person working a toll a little salary, we say, listen, you must sit in a hot glass box and breathing fumes will pay for no reason, just so that you can seem like you're useful to society and go to love. So it's things like that that just make absolutely no sense.
I think the attachment of being useful as a person in society to money is just the weirdest thing it's just the weirdest thing about the way that we create our societies. That your ubuntu bakho, your wena bakho has to be attached to not strange. Okay, let's take the next one. Sure.
Okay, greetings to everyone. I'm giving feedback from the economic development. Okay, I think what we agreed upon is that firstly, we felt for us to have, an idea in South Africa, which is economically active. Number one, we need to ensure that there is easy access to the factors of production. We are obviously of the understanding that the country does have, your factors of production. You talk about land, you talk about natural resources, etc. But the reality on the ground is that much as we've achieved in democracy, the issue of land in terms of ownership, it's still a challenge. So obviously it needs a bit of limitation, I would say, to entrepreneurs who are coming from historically marginalized groups, such that, I think particularly in KZN, taking the tribal authorities, land is mainly attached to our courts and ruling rules and everything in Rivonia transport. So it limits then the your citizens and the normal community members from even being able to get funding to use that land for economic activism. So we also believe that if there could be your easy access to the factors of production, including issues of land ownership and access thereof, then we can be rather in a better country as a society. We spoke of equal wealth redistribution. Again, we were coming from the very same background. In South Africa is very rich when we are coming to natural resources. Then we have those natural resources, unfortunately, benefiting the few. I will talk about your DBS and who have you, in terms of who are in the line of business that actually benefits directly from the natural resources. So we often view for us as a country that we need to make sure that there is equal redistribution of wealth, so that at least we can say economically we are all empowered as South Africans. In the improved infrastructure network, we plan to put again, it will attract or it will increase investor appetite, because if we've got proper road network, even for the things that are I would say imported to our ports, it will be easy to ferry them across neighboring countries and to many parts of the country. So we are offering that it will actually encourage foreign investment and domestic investment. And then we agreed on industrialization as well. We are of the view that there must be a deliberate effort of making sure that whatever whether it's manufacturing plants or whether it's your clothing and textile industry, if you need to re-establish like your firms, your wide ribbon, there must be a production where you translate natural resources into finished goods that you can be able to export or actually trade amongst ourselves as the country. And then lastly, we agreed on regulated economic activism for environment. We understand, we see obviously in country too. I think it's got like your well-established companies or corporates. It's got also your emerging entrepreneurs, and it's also open even to foreign nationals who are willing to trade. So we're of the view that if there could be a regulated, highly regulated environment, then it will obviously ensure that like all businesses that are there, they are legit, there is no trading, illicit stuff, and lastly, even the fiscal drain will be limited because we wouldn't have taxes that are actually lost and not circulated in our economy. Thank you.
Sabonga. Igroup yokugcina.
into esana kusebenza previously amaplants. What I've seen ukuthi abantu laba abakubili abantu were not supposed to be there because they were young before. Even if I was asking one of my community leaders about he told me in year 2000 or 2002, or in course, because then by my father or government to check with the rights and unfortunately, they all know the ICR declined I was dealing with schools or so my view or my point is people who are in power should not prioritize in profits or in people. And then point number two, illegal dumping, because I said this. Why or to prepare then our third one would see like let's say in this area we have natural resources as well for the figure companies who want to use those resources indaba kungenziwa ama-proper engagement with umphakathi because that as much as kuzokreathela imisebenzi but we also need to look at ama-negative ukuthi ama-chemical azoba-right ngeke zi-destroy then it was yes, communities program who are teaching about but how about we go further more with if like people would receive a deal to protect and also the matter
okay, so you know, as Lukhona Mnguni, one of the things that is clear for me is that as a man, we have a clear understanding that this is our main way to other way to ascertain the right? This distance between us and government and governance needs to stop. And Usanele, say hi. Usanele said something very profound the other day, that the vote is ours and the democracy is for those in power. And for me, I don't know that I can live in that kind of society where the only thing I have is the vote. I don't have any other kind of interaction with my government. My government doesn't have to pay. Once I've cast loyal, ex-loyal, they don't have to pay, they don't have to do anything. They don't have to work. This is a job to be in government. And yeah, and that's deeply concerning for me, that the vote is mine and the democracy is theirs. And so when we, at Rivonia Circle, when we speak about politics, we usually speak about the power to act. Ukuthi sizokwenzani, yini esikwazi ukuyenza. And that politics gives us that ability. Sizosho ukuthi hayibo, ngeke nikwazi ukubeka abantu lana because it's dangerous ngalezi indlela. Because makuba nekhukhula lana kwenzeka ukuthi nokuthi nokuthi. Siyakwazi. And our ability to say full basic income grant, and this is why we want it, and this is how it's going to help our society and to help our people, because we want to have a political shift. There has to be a radical shift in the way when we think about politics, when we think about democracy, governance, economics, the environment, finally shifting the way. And I think that that's incredibly important. And I think that has come up clearly in all the engagements that we've had this year, but specifically here in Durban. I'm going to ask that we just for about, for like the next 10 minutes that we share, maybe 5, so on, let's come back, and let's, some of you share some of the work that you are doing in your communities, in your own spaces. And communities here don't always have to be geographic locations. It could be a sort of an interest group or a policy group, or the policy community, as we're calling it. Because I think it's important. Ukwazi ukuthi yini esiyenzayo singabantu sisemphakathini. Khona sizokwazi ukuthi mina ngingena ngiphosa kuphi sana, because that is the power to act. The work that you do in your community clearly shows the power to act. What's your hand up, Don?
Everyone, my name is Linda. I just wanted to talk about how to act and also talk about community governing themselves. So this is where the blood happened and immediately after the whole fiasco just died out. And my community, we had a meeting ourselves as people in the area to say, so how can we help those who lost their homes, income and stuff. So what we did is that we decided to just ignore the council level, and set up systems that could help you with people that need. So what we did is that we went to the local principal and said we need a school that will house people that are lost their homes. We went to churches and stuff, and people in the community say, you have a lot of prayer. Just go to the next time. So I just wanted to say that we've been doing this for the past 2 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, and it's working. So it's calling other people to come and put in food, clothing, even the basic things like, we have all the from just to someone who needs it. So, I mean, we've seen a lot of that, that system working.
Yeah.
When you have now a kind of something, you say, what do you need? It's for 2 days, income appreciation area. So we took up ourselves to say, we want to do this and have our neighbors. So, I mean, I think it's, I'm not sure, maybe it's some people say it's radical, but I think we need to have the capacity to govern themselves. In the olden days, when the state charters, you don't have charters for the whole village. That's how it happens. And I see that the whole has a room to happen allow for communities to govern themselves.
Yeah. Abaya? Yeah.
I don't necessarily want to talk about necessarily what I'm doing, but I want to ask a question about you and we talk about how we need to learn how to self-govern as a community. How everyone in the room is already sort of trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
My opinion is that we talk about 2.0 South Africa, but how do we go to 2.0 South Africa when 1.0 hasn't even fixed the previous 0 and 7? Because yes, we can learn how to govern our communities efficiently.
Yeah.
But I think everyone in this room has to know that we suck to coexist. Because we still exist in sort of isolated, apartheid design systems. I'm from a very color community.
Yeah.
Simple example, last year July community. You had people who were prepared to kill people for stealing from business, had nothing to do with it. And the immediate mindset was that people are going to somehow have it in them. And so you had some tension between communities. I come from a community, color community, previous color community, that was actively trying to kill the people from their neighboring black community and was locked out from when a shop from their neighboring white community with force where a pregnant woman was beaten up and being killed. How do we coexist in that? So it's all through my God that we as an individual might be able to solve our community problems, which I think is a bit too ideal.
Yeah.
If that's the surrounding systems. So we have not to live next to each other. So what happens with that?
That is a question for the room. I will not attempt to answer that question. I ain't got it. There's a yes.
Well, no, I'm not answering that question.
Before the question, it's not so weird. The question.
Yes. All right. I think one of the things that our country needs is to change the colonized state of education. Because now you can see that apartheid, it was a system that divided us. So there hasn't been any improvements in terms of how we receive education as people. So we are still using strategies that were taught during the apartheid in terms of architecture, how we structure our communities, still the same thing. So if we change the kind of education that is given to students in such a way that everybody must understand that the system that exists is still apartheid. So what we do to young people, we must be able to give them education that will say, go back to your community after receiving education. Yeah. Because we have young people are living in Kwa-Zulu. I have seen my peers that I grew up with. So once you get a better job, the people living in Lukhona, your parents raised you in this place, you know the crisis of our community. Yeah. Once you get a better education, you are going out. Why is not your education
benefit?
Like to say I am remaining within this community to empower those who are coming after me. So we want to say we receive education and then we aspire to that life, which was previously privileged for a certain race of people. So now the education says if you want to be better, you must go and live in a ready privileged place, then enriching your own community. So if we change, we can be able to get education that will make sure that we instill in our youth's minds to say we are responsible to fix our communities. So we must not use our education as a commodity to consume other commodities,
Yeah.
but to make sure that we empower our communities so that we can be able to bridge this gap that we have of the privilege and the black masses who are endowed in poverty.
Greetings to all. My name is Lukhona Mnguni from University. So, Mnguni is a school so, umsebenzi engiwenzayo emphakathini we're coming from a youth-led community development organization, which is an NGO. So, CISA, this organization was mainly focused on youth. We are developing but we saw in a lot of if we develop so we needed to know even the party is equal and we need to see development because it's not develop but if we party is equal how we develop so finance is in this time. So basically I think 2 weeks back we wanted to make a flats what we saw that after flats now, because this organization is everywhere, it's trying to put it everywhere. I think for now we have 5 branches. We are concerned with initially funding ways and so on, and then so since these branches are in the second one, it's an full pass, which is everywhere. So we saw that that was like affecting our organization as one language. So when we went there one day to donate some clothes, we called for some donation from people in the land, Sawaki, by donating some food, donating some and so on for this sort of skill. What we saw about the elders when you go on research, going down and know everything. But Boba Lukhona Mnguni cancer. The problem is if I think Ama Council one the imposition of the council is something every trade with everything they know which years back the site they are failed because it's a wet land. If you put it something but because the interest of benefits are already they are giving example to the link there and what can and so on. Simon say that when you go on research before I know but that doesn't mean what's from the fact that you say before, which is there are many changes and for now, I'm still wondering jump over in our any that damage like so about now and also I was also concerned if social media the way it's a way at home. Which is all along like the summer but if somebody one is passing so the one thing is in your head in government way is failing at because of who benefits
Yes, and then Sanele, hand over to my friend Lukhona is going to take us through the last 30 minutes. Okay, Lukhona, after.
Greetings to you all. My name is Sanele from Power of Medicine Science, Chair of Power of Medicine Science. The organization is in and also help my students, but more we motivate students to go for science and mathematics. So since our days, we have this thinking which is called maths is difficult and the science is difficult. So we're trying to make it easier for them. Maths is not difficult, just we need to change the channel of thinking in medicine. But within since we work on our flats, we go out to our community, and that's what's a bit one. We go out to our community and try to help. And mostly I would like to thank for the Council of Aseka, which was nominated back in 2 months, if I'm not mistaken. We have a great engagement with him, and we also invited other sectors to accommodate those who have been flooded. So we took those people and then we sent to Hall in a hall called Madrid. They were living there. We have like 125 people living there who were lost from flooding. But we also like to thank our private sector such as SASO who have also come to give donation and also blankets and all the stuff. But we are still asking people to also help us in order for us to help them. But we were told that to speak on behalf of the business of Wakil, they were told this was Wakil only there, and we are not supporting the structure because we didn't get from to society home very well. So we want proper houses for them. And we called Miawa Disaster Ethereum Municipality to be part of that meeting. And Miawa Disaster, they are still supporting the idea of holding them. And we are not supporting that idea, but we're still waiting for feedback on local government to assist the team. Okay, so I'm going to say like 2 months. About the is what comes into them without knowing the part of society.
Sorry, I have a hand here, and then hopefully.
So in 2020, we did some research about the economy of South Africa. We found that South Africa has got the most unequal economy in the world. 90% of our resources, our wealth, our land belong to 10% of the population. This research was done by Stellenbosch University, was done by the BBC, was done by many other organizations. So we started Buy Black Foundation. Buy Black Foundation is all about taking consumer money to black-owned businesses. Because if you look at your ShopRites, your Spars, your Pick n Pays, your Vodafones, your MTNs, your Sasol, your Total, all these companies that are running our economy, 90% of their consumers are black people. Our malls, Gateway, Pavilion, you name any mall in South Africa, most of these malls are owned by what you call white monopoly capital, but the consumers, the customers who shop there every day, it's black consumers. So we started Buy Black Foundation, and we've been running it since 2020. We've been trying to get people to trust black business, to buy from black business, and to take money into the townships and rural areas. Because even if you go to the townships right now, you will find that the same malls are in the township, the same ShopRites, the same spas that are in the townships. Now we've got even the Pakistani-owned spa shops running in the townships. According to my research, there's over 100,000 spa shops owned by foreign nationals in South Africa right now. So we are on a journey to take the economy back to the majority of the country and to create a more equal economy. It's not about black versus white for us. It's not a racial thing, but it's about fixing the errors of the past. And these errors were deliberately created. The inequality was deliberately created. Our banks are, this is a fact. Our banks, so FNB, Absa, Standard Bank, Union Bank, these are apartheid legacy banks. Try to start a bank as a black person now and see how far you get. So we are doing programs, we are hosting seminars in different parts of the country, and we are also rebranding ourselves right now. Our new name is the Township and Rural Economic Empowerment Foundation. So that is what we are doing, and we welcome anyone that would like to participate in what we are doing.
Someone, right?
For instance, before working. So we need feasibility study, it touches such a system, we need to make food before working on the other. So what is the culture and what do they imagine about food in there? Lesizibuke lezi zinto zama-consequences azoba negative ekugcineni. Bese kuba yile ndaba yamathenda lawa, angazi ukuthi amathenda lawa acebisa ukuthi uthenga miliyoni. Siqale lesi South Africa Imagine if you understand that few people are benefiting in the space of majority of citizens. Abantu balala taking umuntu angabe ngokuthi ezibuleza abazi ukuthi indaba abantu besikole bona bathi ukuthi bayahamba bayokhangela abasazi ivinali community akambayo even abantu nje abazali bakhe so nje indaba yokuzana yamathenda
yeah, well, so Lukhona, as you come up, so Lukhona at the Rivonia Circle in Tasizanai is looking at research and policy work. Musha at Rivonia Circle officially, so we welcome him. But as you come forward, Fred, I want you to respond to some of, or at least just share some of your thoughts on the conversation that we've been having. But I think what you were saying earlier on around our inability to coexist and then think that we can see Viksasa and self-govern and that will work. Maybe it's a dream, it's maybe it's a responsibility we achieve. So I'm gonna ask you to support some of the applications and then you can
It's always good to be in Durban.
Where are you standing?
I don't know where I'm standing because I can't be a circle myself unless I'm attendance right here. Yeah. It's good to see some people I see a lot on Twitter like Michael. It's really good to be in Durban. I've sort of been taken away by COVID. This has been my home for the last 12 years as an adult. I think I'm going to start with that question of how sometimes idealistic in our thinking we can be, that we can coexist. The reality is that we can coexist. When I'm looking at this room, and I see that, in fact, if we are deliberate and intentional about coexisting, we can coexist. In this room, there are people who are fairly high income earners. In this room, there are people who are unemployed. In this room, there are people of as many races as we find in our society. In this room, there are community organizers, there are professionals, there are activists, there's another category of people I'm missing that I identified as I was listening and participating this morning. Or the academics, yes, my fellows, like Ndombela there. So, in actual fact, in this room, you got a very interesting base of power of what it means to be South African. But people don't just find themselves in the same room. You've got to be intentional about how you do it. Probably why I'm a big advocate for public transport is because if you take the London Underground, for example, in the UK, you have executives sitting next to cleaners, security people, and unemployed people who are going to look for work because of how you have designed it. Now you may say, it means nothing. It's just a coach, it's moving, and it delivers people. But what you begin to do is you build an infrastructure that forces people of all different backgrounds to be in the same space. We can do that it is possible to do that. That it is not being done is not our problem. Our problem is, how do we, in that upgraded South Africa 2.0, make sure that these elements exist to build that society? So you say 1.0 has not fixed 0.0. True. One of the former presidents likes to make, I don't know, I won't say who because I don't think it's a thing that he says publicly. He says, you know, I hear about this fourth industrial revolution, and my worry is that we have not even perfected, to a large extent, the first and the second. Because our coal-powered fire stations are just in ruins. We don't have energy security, which of course electricity was probably the biggest transition from the first to second. And he says we have not perfected that transition, and we are already talking about fourth industrial revolution. And of course, some countries are now on society 5.0 and not the fourth industrial revolution. They've taken lessons from the fourth industrial revolution, and they are now rebuilding certain humanistic elements to the technology revolution so that society does not lose its essence of being humane. And that's why we talk a lot now about ethics and morality and questions of investigating this fourth industrial revolution. Are robots people? Do we text them? Do we not text them? There are all these questions that are being grappled with, and this is the 5.0 that people are talking about. So when I was coming here, I was asked to jot down a few notes in terms of what I really want to say. So at Rivonia Circle, I think they have not decided whether they call each other friends or leaders or compatriots, but I think they don't want to call themselves comrades because the word comrade has been contaminated over time. Such a noble word that has been contaminated by the tender system, because you must be a comrade if you are going to get that 100 million. You can't just get that 100 million, rest assured. So I'll say good morning. Is it afternoon now? Is it morning? Morning, friends and compatriots. I'll stick to that for now. I'll give them a working term. As I've been there long enough. Circular. We'll get there. We'll get there. I know this with institutions of higher learning. UKZN has been struggling for the longest time to how do students call each other. At WITS, they are WITSes. So, you know, it depends where you are. Look, I want to start off by saying in the life of any country, there comes a time where citizens have to take action, and very decisive action, and reshape the course of their future. And this time has come for us as South Africans. All the excuses we have made previously to avoid active political action are no longer relevant. Alan and I had an interesting banter about this a few weeks ago. And I think there is a far greater risk if we refuse the call to action. Far, far greater risk. If we do not intervene in the decay taking place in our country now, those who have jobs will be jobless in numbers. Those who do not have jobs will have a bleak future of being condemned to unemployment and poverty. Life will be persistently more violent than it is now. Our collective humanity will be reduced to scavenging for survival. Do not ignore the signs of decline. We do not have to wait until the whole nation building project has collapsed. That idea of chop it down, burn it up, build it from the ashes, it's only a phoenix that can probably rise from the ashes, not us. We have to act, and act now. For years, many of us have spent time complaining in the margins about the state of politics in South Africa. We have given enough time to politicians to get their act together. They simply refuse to deliver. on our demands and expectations. And by the way, these demands and expectations are not our invention. They are anchored on the very South African Constitution. We have no choice but to intervene directly as citizens because this is our South Africa. Everyone who leads does so at our behest. But before we intervene, we've got to probably try and answer the question, what is politics? I borrow a lot from the feminist movements of the late 1960s, who ultimately demonstrated to us that the personal is political. And by this slogan, they were trying to express a common belief among feminists that the personal experiences of women are rooted in their political situation and gender inequality. However, we can extend this logic for all citizens in our society. The fact that young people are loitering without work and not studying is a political issue. Many will present it as an economic issue. No, the economy is not working. This and that. The economy depends on strong political institutions. That is why strong political leadership, unwavering political will, and strong political institutions, and the need to get things done and political planning for the country are at the center of determining whether you have a good or bad economy. If you don't have the political leadership, the political institutions, the political will, rest assured, you are not going to have a well-oiled economy. This is why in some of our spaces we care more about what we call the political economy, because we appreciate the intersection of politics and the economy. The economy is not a separate issue. The fact that you feel unsafe in your own home after having locked up and set the alarm, if you are that fortunate to have an alarm, is a political issue. There are certain political decisions that keep us unsafe in our spaces. There are political choices that perpetuate violence in our society. Why are we not cleaning up the police? Why are we not resourcing them adequately? Why must there be a crisis for the minister to go to a police station and say, I will give 15 vehicles? Where were those vehicles before the crisis? Why are the police not enforcing laws in this country? Cold drink, and people die because when I want a cold drink. You stop enforcing the law because you get a cold drink. Kids are in drugs and substance abuse. They drop out of school because of cold drink. In that moment, it's just cold drink. But the after effects of that cold drink to society are far dire. The fact that almost 7,000 people are murdered in South Africa in a 3-month period is cause for concern. Where is our rage? Where is our alarm? Because it could be you who gets murdered. We've become people who are no longer shocked or moved. It is just statistics. No, it is not. These are people's lives being lost to senseless violence because as a society we have lost our way. We are leaderless. I understand there are people who are in leadership positions. They are occupying them and they are being paid to occupy them, but they are not leading. We are leaderless. This is why I think all of us here must accept the call to action. For you to be part of a community that is trying to resolve some of the pressing political questions in our society. Direct representation. People like Michael have probably been working in that space for the longest time, trying to knock sense on why this makes sense, but everybody accepts it makes sense, but there's just no will to actually have it being lived out. We don't know the people who are in parliament. They're not there on our mandate. They are there on party mandates. And then they get imposed on us with these parliamentary constituency offices that are half the time locked up and not working and not resourced. That community is the Rivonia circle. We are hard at work at the Rivonia circle, meeting people, listening to them, and convening different layers of our society, bringing people together and bridging the various class, race, gender, and choice divides in our society. And I've already tried to demonstrate how in this very room that bridging exercise is taking place. We want to bring back to the center a need to build a thriving South Africa. But we need you to be part of this journey because you have the solutions about the problems we have in this country. I say this all the time. If the things that the people in this room are doing in their communities, let's just talk about the flood. If you were not doing that and other work that you were doing before the floods, this country would have long collapsed. If we just solely depended on the efficiency of government institutions, this country would have long collapsed. It's through the work that you are doing that we are still hanging there as a country. Can you believe that when these floods happened and some people were taken to temporary shelters, they found people who have been there since 2017 floods? There are people who for 5 years almost have not been reintegrated to their communities, to their families. So you can rest assured that the ones who are in temporal shelter now in 2022 might still be there when 2025 comes. There is absolutely no strategy. Older activists in Durban will know there's been a serious problem with the Durban South Basin because of the chemical and gas emissions and air pollution there. Activists have been asking the municipality to develop an evacuation plan for the Durban South Basin, and it has not happened. If you talk to people like this, they'll tell you the whole story. So we are leaderless. All our problems are political by nature. By the way, I often say this. While I praise communities for what they are doing, it's my wish that people who are doing community work could at least have half of their problems solved so that they too can enjoy the pleasures of life and being alive. You know, being an activist is so difficult because you are always worried about the next problem and the next solution and the next thing. You even forget to go to the beach and just watch the sea. It's a pleasure of life. But because the system is so bad, it has robbed you of that pleasure of life. Amanye ama-activists akasakwazi nokujola, senama-girlfriends nama-boyfriends. Umshado-ke even worse. Uma nje ngo-boyfriend no-girlfriend upartner nje nqa kube mnandi. Some activists have not received kisses in a long time. They are always running from one thing to the next thing, from one thing. Am I lying? You know, one former MEC here in KZN. I'm sorry if it's too close to home. One former MEC here in KZN, when they were pressing the network companies, mobile network companies, to install more connectivity in rural parts of KZN, he said they were telling us about the ease of doing business and this. He said, no. We do these things to improve the quality of life of citizens. We want to make sure that Lukhona does not have to cross 2 villages to talk to his girlfriend and just pick up the phone because there's network. Sometimes, when we are trying to solve political issues, we always want to sound big and fancy. The economy, the macro. How are we impacting the lives of citizens and improving the quality of their lives? The fact that you are sad from anxiety about your state of existence is a political issue. The fact that you have not been happy in your soul is not just a personal matter, it is political. That is why the United Arab Emirates has a cabinet portfolio called the Minister of Happiness and Well-being. We're still fighting for Minister of Transport and Sports. During COVID, some governments introduced the Minister of Loneliness. You can Google it if you think I'm lying. Minister of Loneliness. Because they wanted to understand how can government support people in their time of loneliness and make their lives better and cheerful. You see how these things are political? And you don't believe me. It's okay. Google will help me. Politics must not just be about power and power plays. It must be anchored on the need to foster well-being for South Africans, to imbue them with dignity in order for them to be humanized and the liberation promise to be fulfilled. We are our own liberators. These ones who tell you that they went to exile, we know and we appreciate. But now they're messing up, some of them. Now they've created a double crisis for us. To liberate ourselves from their mess, and to liberate ourselves from the real problem of colonialism and apartheid. We now have a bigger job than they did. They had to deal with the apartheid system. Now they've corrupted the democratic system. Now we are faced with 2 mountains to climb. One is created by people who look like us, who spoke our language of liberation, who hijacked Umzabalala. Rest assured they are black. They are not victims of white monopoly capital. They decided to collude with white monopoly capital, if that were the case. So we've always been our liberators, and we must never forget that. For some reason, we became distracted, believed that the task to liberate belongs to a few. It is our noble duty to respond to the call to action and act now. We don't have the luxury of time. In fact, we are out of time. We have to convince each other about this proposed call to action, but we must not waste too much time trying to convince each other, because the ship will hit an iceberg and it will sink. Rivonia Circle has a mission to redefine South Africa's political center and remake its social contract in line with social democratic principles. We believe that this foundation on values of freedom, equality, justice, and solidarity is one which South Africans identify with. Ours is not a single issue agenda. We are developing a whole of society approach. Rivonia Circle is an inviting platform for various players, people, and organizations to step into the circle for the realization of their aspirations. You are invited to deposit your issues, help us with the process of fine-tuning them, and crafting them into serious policy propositions. We are not in the business of lobbying those. We are not in the business of lobbying others for implementation. Ours is to roll our sleeves and get into the circle, into the field, to implement these policy proposals. There is no coming of a Messiah to rescue us. Jesus might come. I don't know when. That's the Bible as well. It doesn't know when, the day, the time. So there's no Messiah who's coming for these problems we are facing. And Steve Biko writes it in his book. He says, black people have a tendency to believe that God is going to come down from the sky and solve their problems. I'm not saying don't pray, but I'm saying God is not going to come down and solve the problem. You must pray for God to give you strength and wisdom to solve the problem. Not for him to come down and intervene. There's not going to be a flash of light and voila, magic. No. Andikhathali noma ukholwe kangakanani. uNkulunkulu angeze eze emhlabeni azolungisa inkinga zethu. We can pray for guidance, for wisdom, and for resilience. But for him to come and be the mayor, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You must decide who must the right mayor be. We are our own liberators. We have given enough time for others to act. They have delivered these dirty and dangerous cities we live in. They have delivered this unemployment and economic ruin that impoverishes South Africans. They have delivered the careless healthcare and the snaking queues at home affairs. That's what they have delivered. They have delivered the looting of our tax money. Skatele ukuphathwa izinswelaboya. Skatele amaseko. We are out of time, compatriots. We need to act and act now. We have a fair idea of the problems. We must spend more time crafting a solution with collective buy-in among ourselves. We don't have to like each other to work together. People like this thing of, oh, I used to like you. Don't like me. Love your country. And let's work together. If you like me, that's a bonus. It means we could drink a beer together. We could cry. But we don't have to. We really don't have to. We don't have to be friends to solve the problems of the country. It's a bonus if we are friendly to each other. But we must be committed that we love our country and we have shared values on what a deep commitment to South Africa means for our collective well-being. We are not islands. You see this thing, Kamina, Mina, me right, I like I, it's right. You might be fine as an individual, but if you are not checking if the collective is fine, trust you me, your being fine is going to collapse very soon. Yes. You can't be fine alone. Life doesn't work like that. You're not in an island or in Durban email. They come back. Because life is about the collective. What is the state of our collective well-being? It's not sustainable, by the way, that we are just going to live behind high walls. Why are we building these high walls? For other South Africans not to come to us. Why are they coming to us? Why is there this crime that we are worried about? Because we have not fixed something in our society. Go to Belleville. I love Belleville. Because Belleville is still one of the few neighborhoods that are fairly middle class, that actually have open fencing. You can see your neighbor. These high walls, you don't even see your neighbor. Even when they are doing something wrong in your neighbor's yard, you can't see it. Where is the concept of neighborliness? We don't live in neighborhoods anymore. There are no neighborhoods because we've got these high walls. But we are building these high walls for other fellow South Africans whom we are trying to run away from. What has gone wrong in our society? So I'm going to say, we have complained enough. Nobody cares to listen. I'm sure it's not the first day you are complaining about them. I'm sure it's not the first year you are complaining about them. What are you going to do about it? That's what you must ask yourselves now. You can't change the tender system if the people who benefit from the tender system are in government. You can only change the tender system if they are out. So what are you going to do about it? It is time to act and act now. I have a great deal of impatience and urgency about this need to act and act now. This is our home. This country is our heritage. This is our entitlement. This is our South Africa. We do not need permission from anyone to act. I know some say politics is dangerous. Well, here in KZN, politics is deadly. It's not just dangerous. They kill people here, protecting this gender system. If that is a price to be paid in order to get a critical mass behind the vision to build the South Africa we deserve, then let it be. Let them come. They won't kill all of us. They'll kill a few, but the need to act and act now must continue to be preached. We must be unwavering in our commitment, courageous in our beliefs, and stubborn in the principles that drive us. We must be willing to be persuaded, but unwilling to be hijacked. We must be willing to collaborate, but unwilling to be compromised. This is our collective project and pursuit. The situation in South Africa is very urgent. It is not just about political preferences anymore. It is now about saving our future, literally. Songezo Zibi, our non-executive chairman, was trying to drive a point home last week that the former finance minister of Afghanistan is now an Uber driver in the US. Are you hearing me? Eh? Can you imagine Trevor Manuel, an Uber driver in Sweden? Tito Mboweni, an Uber driver in Mexico. Sounds strange, huh? But you know what? That's the kind of stuff that happens when countries collapse. Lecturer Siyabonga Ntombela, UKZN. You'll go be a sweeper in London because there'll be no UKZN when the country collapses. Let's not take this thing lightly. Let's not ignore the signs of decay. It's either we continue on the current path to decay or decide to act and be bold. Of course, we will be vilified for acting. We will lose our jobs for acting. Our families will be disrupted. Our privacy will be invaded. All of this and more is the cost of disagreeing with the status quo. You can't disagree with the current madness and think your life is going to be comfortable. So we're not inviting you to a community of easy action. It's not the easy way out. I know some of you who are activists in communities have been harassed because the councillor thinks you are trying to take the spotlight away from them. And then maybe you are going to stand and be the next councillor. Because the politician thinks that you are now seeking more fame than them, or you are bad-mouthing them to the community. But they're not working. But the cost of disagreeing is large, but the benefit is probably larger. So let it be, because we are out of time, and we need to act, and act now. Thank you.
So every meetup we have a call to action, and that was our call to action this morning. And so I want us to end our meetup today. With just a few reflections. And I want your reflections to come in two forms. One, has this conversation today or the work that we've done in communities in Durban in the last few days given you something that you want to share with us in terms of what you are thinking about your own action going forward? And two, are there things that you think we can come as an organization, but also as people in this room are doing various things, and things that you think we should start thinking about as we go forward about how we collaborate and do things differently? So I'm going to take 3 hands because we're now under enormous pressure.
Yeah.
I know we are, but I'm you're alone.
Yeah, it's a bit tough.
We're going to, if we continue to talk, it's going to be. So I'm going to do 1 minute each, 3 weekends, and then we're going to have time to speak outside and chat. It's a meetup, so we'll be able to chat. But I want to end it with your voices in the room. 3 weekends.
Thank you to our speaker. Thank you, Lukhona. And to it has been such an important venue. Say something. I think what the Rivonia Circle can consider doing is to activate the only thing that we said we have, right? We said we have vote, and they have democracy. I think we need voter education so that they can have an idea of what to do next to move from South Africa 1.0 to South Africa 2.0, so that we can get rid of ourselves, right? We need voter education. Because what often happens is that when it's during the election time, we find people who are actually sold, right, to the devil through alcohol. They are bought alcohol and they are told, go and vote for so and so. Because they've already made a pact with so and so who's going to give them 10 benefits. So you are just a conduit in this corrupt circle that continues. So to break that circle, we need people who are voter enlightened, voter educated, and who are, aware of the dangers of putting people in power who are not supposed to.
Great. Second intervention. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask whether it is possible also to do some education where I realize that in many communities, young people and all society that's large can do a stokvel for alcohol and food. You see, if you can do a stokvel in a community, the money that we use to buy alcohol and do business, we can be able to empower ourselves. So just to change the mindset, are there any strategies to, do?
Great. One more intervention. Anyone? Going once? Going twice?
I just want to say something, thanks for the power of speech, but something that I feel a little uncomfortable about what you're saying, and it's around the idea that, so we talk systemic and we talk structural issues, and I think when we start talking systemic and structural issues, it removes the individual, but it starts talking to processes that are embedded in the fabric of society. And when we start talking at that level, we aren't failing. We succeeding very well. It's just we succeed in a system that designed us to fail. And so my concern is that we talk about things like the 2.0 surveillance. We can get rid of the whole government. But if we put new people in there without figuring out why we're failing, it means those people are inevitably going to fail.
Yeah.
So we can't blame the system because the system is designed to fail. So how do we start talking about systems that aren't designed to fail, systems that are designed for us to succeed? How do we start? And I think that's what, you all said that this whole KZN wants to burn things to and start scratch. That comes out of fallism, which happened at the university. This idea that we need to demolish the structural and systemic systems that are designed to make us fail, so that we can build structures that are designed to make us succeed. And so I think that's where it comes from.
Yeah, and so I just want to end off by saying, to respond to all three, because I think it will give some context. One, that's the reason why we're talking about that concept, because we want to take a systems approach and encourage systems thinking, and not encourage it necessarily. When I say South Africa 2.0, I'm not talking about a South African government 2.0. I am saying, how do we even talk about that? And so the Democracy Builder Project, and we've now got 6 projects that have started in Durban that are about giving people platforms to actually start designing things from the ground up about what it is they want to do in their communities. And we also have given the opportunity for 2 communities who are going to do their own democracy builders exactly for that point, so you start thinking about what that looks like practically. On the other hand, there's 2 things that we'll be doing in the next few months. One, there's a group in the Eastern Cape who are a group of young people who decided that before 2024, they're going to get 100,000 young people registered for the election, and they're going to create a civic education program to do that. And so it's stuff like that that I think is important, and we want to. So that's why I said it's not only our program that we put out. People come to us and they say, here's something, help us do it, and that's something that we're working on. And then there's also something around exactly the economic issue around this that you mentioned. But I'll close off by saying this. Ours too, when we do the meetups, it's really just to introduce ourselves to communities, because you don't come to people's communities without introducing yourself and saying who you are. But it is not the end of a conversation. Hopefully it's the beginning of a conversation. And hopefully it's the beginning of difficult conversations that will be ongoing. But we hope that you understand who it is that we are, and that the engagements that we start here will hopefully bear fruit in many different ways. So we thank you for sharing your morning with us. Let's connect with each other over lunch as we go. And hopefully, as we continue to engage, many of the issues that we've raised will become clearer over time. Yeah? So can we end there? All right, thank you everyone for joining us this morning.